Chemtrails? What are chemtrails?
Chemical trails, Daddy, and they're very bad.
I look up to the sky. Can you tell me why? Can you tell me why?
Hello, this is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org radio for the week of March 21st, 2015. Weeks go by fast when you're trudging through this trench every day. I know a lot of other people out there are as well, for which I'm very, very grateful. And the people who have truly showed stamina in this fight. And that's something that is unfortunately not so common, but I hope it becomes more common as people start to put other unnecessary things aside to focus on what needs to be done and what needs to be done now. Because this is not a part-time occupation to try to change the course of the Titanic, again, that we all find ourselves on. So the weeks do go by incredibly quickly. This week now, it is official that the Arctic ice is at all-time record low, and the winter maximum was reached. It's the second earliest on record. So the ice melt started early, and it's at all-time record lows in spite of all the headlines. It's official now, so I would encourage anybody to just Google search that, see how many headlines you see. You won't see it on TV too much. In fact, on the Weather Channel, the only thing they wanted to talk about was the record snow in Boston. But it's going to be hard to hide this as the weeks go on. And what's interesting is going back to 2007, again, when a lot of people have convinced themselves that this is some intentional effort to melt the Arctic, and the data just simply doesn't support that at all. So if we go back to 2007, when the ice first truly started to crash, we saw a pattern set up over the U.S. West that has largely remained ever since. When bad news comes out of the Arctic, the high pressure is locked in, the West fries and dries, the East stays cool, and we've seen this pattern continuously. So we had some rain scheduled for us, and again, I use the term scheduled because that's exactly what it is. It was scheduled for the West Coast for us to get a little bit of rain in late March. When the ice center charts came from the Arctic about a week and a half ago, it looked as if we were heading straight down on the ice extent. Immediately, our schedule weather changed. I've seen this over and over and over the last 8 years. I watch closely on a lot of fronts. So once they know that they've robbed too much out of the Arctic, too much of the cold air, pushing the polar vortexes south, then they do damage control. They have to lock in the high pressure over the west, and the pattern that they set up is to try to slow the ice melt in the Arctic. And they have done that. In fact, after 2007, from 2008 and 2009, the climate science community was scratching their heads as to when the ice almost crashed and the temperatures were continuing to warm, how could the ice extent then expand somewhat? The surface area. Again, ice extent means surface area, not the mass, not the volume, just the surface area. But the climate science community was scratching their heads as to how could that possibly have expanded more when the temperatures were warmer. And this is very indicative of the all-out effort to try to geoengineer that last bit of ice into remaining as long as possible, even if that kills the rest of the planet and is overall, in a wider context, actually making the overall situation worse, not better. Again, the pharmaceutical approach for planet Earth. And this is the sort of tunnel vision that we've always had from the climate science community, which at this point, the fact that we have thousands of climate scientists who are in blatant denial of the undeniable atrocities occurring in our skies should cause everyone to have incredible doubts as to the whole science religion, if you will. And again, I say that with caution as well. I mean, I'm not saying obviously that there is solid basis to a lot of science. There is, but we have a scenario where a lot of people have convinced themselves that the science is wrong in the wrong direction of what it actually is wrong in, and that people have convinced themselves that the scientists are making the situation seem worse than it is. The opposite is true. The opposite is true. The climate unraveling is far worse, and the temperatures are far warmer than what's being officially reported. And again, of course, we all agree that the climate engineering elephant in the room, which is being so adamantly denied, and I just posted on a summary on the experience with Guy McPherson a week ago and his denial, and I think that's indicative of a lot of the climate science community. And I don't like to post an article like that, but it had to be done. I felt it had to be done. That this is not some matter of basic opinion we're talking about where I like red and someone else likes blue or green. We're talking about denial of something that our whole future depends on. And that's not okay. It's not okay for these people to take the position they've taken. Whatever their motive, it's not okay. So as things get worse, I've seen articles from certain people, even in the anti-climate engineering community and the general community and municipalities, and we all want to grab at straws. I mean, it's a natural human tendency to do this. That perhaps I saw one news article that suggested desalinization would save us all. This is no different than climate engineering. It's no different. You can't just tech your way out of the same the scenario that the tech brought on in the first place. You know, two negative steps don't make a correct step. Desalinization is not going to fix anything, and people who don't know much about desalinization, it produces huge amounts of toxic waste, absolutely huge. And how would that water the forests? And how much energy and fossil fuel and pollution does building that salinization plant produce? And again, there's just simply no shortcut here. The industrialized society and the way it's been set up was never sustainable, and we're about to find that out the hard way. So things like desalinization plants are not a fix. I saw some other story from someone that claimed there was no water shortage in California, that there was some sort of perpetual water below the surface. There is deep strata water. There is in a lot of places, but you can't access that. The technology and resources needed to access that water are astoundingly high. The energy it takes to get that water up from such low levels or such deep depths is completely restrictive. It's not a feasible avenue at all. So again, we should avoid grabbing at straws. We simply have to stop the interference with nature. That's simple. It has to be stopped. Climate engineering is the epitome of human insanity. And one other aspect of climate engineering that's not discussed a lot, and I tend not to bring it up because it's confusing to people, but water vapor is also a greenhouse gas. And we see that part of the agenda of the climate engineers is to reduce atmospheric water vapor. In fact, there's a number of models that show a reduction of atmospheric RH, relative humidity, since the late 40s. What happened in the late 40s, that's when these programs were really ramped up. We see a lot of things that started happening in the late 40s. We saw a global overall temperature that suddenly leveled off, even though it had been rising for the previous 100 years, since 1850. Why did that happen? Because the initial geoengineering efforts were much more effective before the negative aspects started to kick in. So we see atmospheric RH, relative humidity, starts to decline in the late 40s. Global mean temperature started to decline. This happened until about the early 70s, again, where the negative feedback started to kick in and temperatures start to go up again. So what does the military-industrial complex do? They start spraying more. That's what they do. When pounding your head against the wall starts to hurt, then with their mentality, you just have to pound harder, and that's what they do. So this is a factor as well. But what scientists don't consider is when the planet is allowed to respond on its own, and humidity goes up, how many of you have felt how cool it feels when a nice big cumulus cloud floats over the top of you and the sun is completely blocked? Instant temperature drop. Whereas we see certain applications of climate engineering actually appear to be for the express purpose of raising the temperature to create high pressure zones. This doesn't mean they're trying to melt the Arctic with this, again, but they're willing to sacrifice the rest of the planet in order to try to keep the last little bit of slush left up in the Arctic. So we do see it a lot over Northern California, where this high-level sprayed haze, actually it feels warmer under that, and the UV readings back this up. The UV readings are higher. It appears they're trying to increase the strength of the high-pressure dome, which increases the clockwise rotation of the northern hemisphere. How destructive is that for the planet? in order to manipulate these snowstorms back east. So water vapor is a factor, but again, as we see with the climate science community that ignores climate engineering, that puts out modeling that's just nothing but what they're given from Raytheon and Lockheed Martin, there's an awful lot of false data floating around in the science community as a whole, as we see with mainstream medicine and a lot of other science communities. We see the charity groups, total hypocrisy there. I brought it before with the Alzheimer's group that people associate with science and medicine, and complete hypocrisy, total hypocrisy. Here we have, as I brought it before, the Alzheimer's organization that refused my $500 sponsorship because they refused to recognize any connection between aluminum and Alzheimer's, something that has peer-reviewed study to back it up. So if we move on to more disinformation, what do we have with, for example, Fox News? And I watch all the major news channels just so I can see what they're dishing up for the population. I know a lot of people don't want to watch TV, and I don't like to watch these channels, and if you watch them very long, your blood starts to boil. I mean, the lies are so incredibly huge at this point that it's hard to even get your arms around it. So in watching Fox News yesterday and their portrayal of the fact that ISIS is this giant threat, I mean, a threat to our country, really? They're a threat to us here in the lower 48? ISIS, who is spawned and armed by our own members of our own government. We have pictures of McCain standing with their representatives, and yet people, they buy this. My own mother buys this. I'm sorry, I hate to bring her up, but she does. And then we have people like John Bolton. For those who don't know who he is, he's on Fox News all the time. John Bolton, who was involved with the death squads in Central America, as if he's a legitimate representative for anything. He should be in jail. He probably should be swinging from a gallows. But that's who Fox has on. And I'm not saying MSNBC or CNN is really any better. I mean, Fox is the worst, but the rest are running close second and third. And then they tried to insinuate on Fox yesterday that ISIS is building a fleet of drones, that somehow that could be a threat to us, that they're that technologically advanced. These guys are driving around in tanks that have been hijacked from other armies and pickup trucks, and really, they're going to have a fleet of drones that's going to threaten us here in the U.S.? This is the build-up for some sort of conflict as the curtain gets pulled back over the power structure. Climate engineering is one of the issues that they can't afford to have the public wake up to. They'll play some sort of card, and perhaps that'll be World War III. And the melting of the ice in the Arctic is important, because if we have a blue water event this summer, and we may, no one knows. Conditions are certainly variable, and whatever cards climate engineers can still play are variable. They've managed to keep the slush going for a long time. But if that happens, I would argue they can't hide climate engineering. If they can't hide climate engineering, they will do something, because they can't afford to have the public wake up to the fact that every single one of us has been irreparably poisoned. So I think we're close to some unexpected challenges, or actually challenges we should expect. Back to a couple more fun facts, and we'll get to callers here in just a moment and bring Russ on. I want to get an update from Russ. So a couple more quick points. When Fox News and other media outlets try to pretend that, for example, Iran is some huge threat, that there's some aggressive country that's just waiting to topple anybody they can possibly get at. Let's look at how many countries Iran has invaded in the last 200 years. How about zero? Zero. How many countries has the U.S. occupied and more or less invaded in the last 50 years? 50 countries. Who's the aggressor? Who's the aggressor? How clear is that? And again, I know people who know they're spraying, who know they're being sprayed, who know climate engineering is going on, who knows that it's poisoning them, but yet somehow they believe the official story about Iran being a threat and the 9/11 being done by somebody directed by Osama bin Laden from some cave in Afghanistan, a diabetic that I'm sure couldn't carry off anything from that location. And they believe these official stories, even though they know their government's doing what they're doing to them. They still believe this. So when we move on to denial, and those who deny whatever truth they deny, and a lot of it with climate engineering, I'm sure a lot of people listening have had the experience where you talk to someone, you present data, it seems to make sense to them, they seem to get it a bit, but then when you see them again, they've been off with their peers who've all, denial loves to convince each other that it's not true. I mean, denialists love to convince each other that there's nothing to fear and that Anybody who says there is just a conspiratorial nut. So they go off and mingle with their peers, and when you see them again, it's like you never had a conversation. It's all erased. They're right back to zero again. But those seeds are still planted, and again, as things unfold and unravel, and that unraveling is occurring rapidly, very rapidly. Again, the climate situation is completely coming apart. So I think those seeds that all of us have helped to plant will soon find fertile ground. Russ, you said in Maine, you guys are cold, lots of snow, more than you've ever seen, you said to me off the air. Again, out here in California, I just shared with you off the air that we've had 2 days below freezing the entire winter, and that was down to about 31 degrees. 2 days. That's it. Kind of a contrast, wouldn't you say?
Well, it's a huge contrast, and what we have right now in Maine is, I believe, the most snowfall we've had since 2006. I believe it's a record, and I can see it. I've lived here since 2008, so I've seen nothing compared to the amount of snow that we have here this year. So, as you always share these maps with us, and we see that, the left half of the United States is scorching above temperatures, the right half is below, and they just continue to engineer this situation and keep the population centers, thinking that it's cold, especially in the Northeast United States where I live. So
it was interesting to see yesterday on that note that, and this is something I've tried to repeat over and over over the last months and years, this engineered cool down of the eastern U.S. So yesterday on the Weather Channel, finally, they showed a GISS map. That's the type of map I typically use. It's a departure from normal temperatures taken from ground locations, and they showed it on Weather Channel yesterday with the bright blue eastern U.S. Everything else in the world is red, and they said exactly this, that if you live in the eastern U.S., it might seem like the whole world's cold, but in fact, the eastern U.S. is the most anomalously cold place in the entire world. Exactly what I've said over and over and over, because you can't hide that. You can only hide that so long, and they can't hide it anymore. So they showed that map. They also talked about yesterday in the Weather Channel the, quote, ridiculously resilient ridge on the U.S. West Coast, and they said this, it's a mystery. We can't figure out what's keeping that ridge there. Well, again, at a certain point, you can't hide things much longer. And the temperatures that are happening now, as soon as the engineered cool downs clear away, or if you're not in one of those zones, it's hot. It's hot out in the sun because they've helped to destroy our atmosphere. They have. And they're continuing to do it every single day. The more damage they do, the more they ramp up the programs in order to try to cover the damage already done by doing more damage. Isn't that the definition of insanity? Same thing they did in the Gulf of Mexico. I use that example a lot. The Corexit, which is the chemical used in the Gulf of Mexico to hide the oil spill. Banned throughout the globe. They used it there in order to make the oil sink sitting in the bottom of the Gulf right now. How come no hurricanes have spun in the Gulf since that time? None. That's not a coincidence. They're suppressing those cyclonic rotations. So, again, we're getting closer. Russ, if I know you're shivering out there, buddy, and I know you're having trouble breathing. A lot of us are. Everybody I know is having some kind of trouble, but how about if you open up the phone lines and see what everybody has to say?
Yeah, no question. I hear from more and more people who are having trouble breathing. I'm having inflammation as I talk on the show, causing lung issues. And I just feel, especially for children out there who are suffering, the parents don't know what's going on. I really hope that they start paying attention to the fact that we're being engineered so dramatically. But for those who want to call in, I've been putting the call-in number in the chat room. You can get that chat room. You can go to the chat room by going to ucy.tv and search for Geoengineering Watch Radio. The number is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. And caller with your number that ends in 50. Who do we have on with us today?
Alan Davis.
Hello, Alan.
How are you?
I'm doing all right, all things considered, Dane. I hope you are as well. I wanted to, I wasn't able to call in last week. I was somewhere. I left town, but had something to do. But I'm continuing my research, and I put in some requests for the reports that were required for anyone engaged in weather modification, starting in around, I don't know when it was, 71 or... Well, it was earlier, but they stopped it for a while. And anyway, I got a response from the
let's back
department.
up. They stopped what? They stopped what for a while?
in the law requiring reports of weather modification activities.
Okay,
And then
they
started-
stopped the law. Okay, now I follow you. I thought you meant they stopped the actual programs for a while, but they stopped the requirement for disclosure for a while.
Yeah. Anyway, I've got a couple of responses from the Department of Commerce and one from the National Science Foundation. They say I'm requesting index lists of all those reports that they received from 1948 to when it was stopped and since then. So my research is ongoing, and for anyone who wants to establish in the law where they stated the policy changed nationwide as far as weather modification, you can find it's Public Law 92-205, Legislative History, Weather Modification Reports. You can get that at any county law library, and they tell you that at that time in 1971, the policy of weather modification was in the hands of the states. There wasn't a national policy established yet. And
Actually, you know what, Alan? I mean, on that note, there was a national program. I don't know about a policy for this particular aspect, but again, the document I found in the NASA archives, people Google 1966 government document GeoEngineering, clearly federal weather mod programs with budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So there's probably a lot of overlapping layers here. It's complex, but again, the more data you turn up, so much the better. And I encourage you, again, when you assemble that, make it clear for people and post that. That's the best use of that, because a lot of this can be confusing because of the multi-layered aspects of this. But if you can assemble that and post it, that's the best way to, and try to condense it. That's the best way for people to really understand your research, which is important.
Well, what was going on was at the time was that federal programs were working with private people, companies who were doing it. That's why they hadn't had a national policy yet, but they were involved, of course. But I'm tracking when they started calling for a national policy and set that up, and that was in 1976. The National Weather Modification Policy Act of 1976 is where that started. And you can get that at the law library. Anybody can look it up.
What would help, though, so that people don't have to go do that, if you're already doing it, if you
I'm going to post.
Yeah,
it's going to take me a while. It's going to take me a while. I'm just telling anybody who wants to go look it up. But I'm going to have everything put together and posted, and I'll let you know. I'll keep you updated on my research.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for all you're doing.
All right. Thanks.
Keep us posted. Yeah, this is again the more that we can not each have to reinvent the same wheel. If Alan's working on that, which is important, if he can assemble it and put it in coherent fashion so that that job's done for anybody who wants that data, we can all get at it. And so we can all engage in some other task with our time that's important for this issue too, so that we're not, overlapping in our efforts. So anyway, but thanks, Alan, for all you're doing.
Yes, thank you, Alan. Caller with your number that ends in 63. What's your name? Caller with your phone number that ends in 6363. Caller, you on the line?
Hello?
Caller,
Who are we speaking with?
Who are we speaking with, caller?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I'm sorry, you're 38. Let me go to the next caller here. Caller with a number that ends in, go ahead, caller that ends in 38. Go ahead. Who are we speaking with?
Yeah, hi. My name is Bo, and basically I live in Toronto, and they started spraying about a couple of years ago really frequently in that area. And ever since then, I was just amazed by the amount of stuff that was in the sky. And pretty much Dane said, even my family members, they get it, they know what's going on, but somehow they're just quiet about it. They don't want to talk about it. There has to be some psychological explanation for all of these amounts of people. I mean, people are not stupid. A lot of people, we got a lot of smart people living here, and they know what's going on, but it's just they choose to ignore this, thinking that, people at the top of the pyramid, they know best in the laboratories, they got it figured out. I'm sure that at some point, that's what they think, that, if they're doing this, they wouldn't be doing this to themselves.
That's very...
a friend of mine, I was playing tennis with him one day, and I said, have you noticed, like, a couple of years ago when they first started spraying, I was like, have you noticed these planes, like, leaving these unnatural trails in the sky? He's like, what, really? And as we stopped playing, I showed him, like, one plane passed by our heads, and I showed him. I said, look at this. And you know what he told me? He goes, as long as I got a beer to drink, I don't care. And I was like...
That kind of an attitude, I think I've shared once before in the show that I had a friend that, he's not a friend anymore, but when it came down to his bottom line opinion of 9/11, he didn't really care that the government did it. He didn't care that 3,000 people died. He didn't care that that was the premise for war in other parts of the world. All he cared about was if that's what it took to keep him driving his big gas-guzzling SUV, to keep his party going, then that was fine with him. That's an absolute total moral depravity with a lot of our society. And on the other people that are intelligent, I agree, it's not a lack of intelligence. It's simply a primitive self-protection mechanism that when something is simply too alarming, people screen it out. And this is the way they're wired. A lot of people are, in fact, wired this way, but that mechanism will not be able to block out the reality that's starting to unfold around us much longer. So again, no matter how much resistance you get, or I get, or anybody listening gets, when you're sharing this data with your family, friends, peers, don't lose confidence. Those people will have to face this soon. And when you're speaking to them, speak from a position of authority. This is going on in our skies, period. The fact that a lot of people around us choose to be blind is not our problem, it's their problem. It doesn't mean you just keep going at the same person over and over when they don't want to hear it, but plant the seed with confidence and move on. And try to find somebody
okay, could I say just one thing, please?
Please.
Yeah, it's just like the way I see it is like everything, with all this complexity, we live in this reality, it's like very complex and on all kinds of levels. And everything that humans made so far, has had side effects. Any medicine, any whatever, doesn't matter what cures we were able to find. There's always some side effect to it. And like something, so it just like shows our imperfection. So something like this on a grand scale like this, I can only imagine what the side effect's going to be on the whole ecosystem. That's all I got to say. Sorry, taking your time.
Thank you for that point. And your point is exactly right. That's why those of us that are completely focused on this issue are, because this is the epitome of human insanity. It's the epitome with human intervention in the natural systems and all the way down the ladder, just like the desalinization plants I mentioned earlier. How utterly insane is it to spread toxic particles in the sky which block the rain, and then to build a plant that produces a lot of toxic elements on the ground to try to make up for the rain that was lost from the interference in the first place. I mean, it's nothing but a chain of insanity that just gets broader and wider the more we try to intervene. So your points are all well taken. Russ, any statement on that?
No, I totally agree. I mean, it is moral. You said a second about moral depravity, and I'm very strong on this point, is that this is a moral issue. People who are moral people do not remain apathetic about the destruction of the planet and of their children's lives and of their loved ones' lives. In this, if we look at ourselves and we're not at least trying to do something, if we know people are not trying to do something, we're not saying that people need to spend 5 hours a day, but there's something that everybody can do, if not first to just become educated about it. If they're apathetic about it, apathy is a moral issue. So I agree with you entirely on that, Dane.
It is a moral issue, and this sort of attitude we see a lot of, that people feel a certain inevitability, so they feel somehow that excuses them from even trying. That's not a valid excuse. The bottom line is, if everybody got up, got in the fight, and helped with what needs to be done, starting with exposing climate engineering and stopping it, who knows how much good we will yet do at this late hour, that we could turn the course that we are on. And the planet obviously has a really incomprehensible ability to sustain life if we would just give it a chance. We have to give it a chance. And again, exposing climate engineering does so much more to expose the power structure, what they've done, the fact they've poisoned the entire population. Again, I don't mean to state or imply that if we stop climate engineering, our troubles are over. Absolutely not. They're just beginning. Industrialized civilization has absolutely plundered the planet, and perhaps beyond repair. But we can't know unless we try everything at our disposal. And the biggest leap we could take in that direction is to focus on a common goal, stopping climate engineering, and that would pull so much else to the surface with it. So anyway, let's continue on, Russ. Anybody's
Yeah, exactly. And it's not only, it's not that everybody even has to do something. If we had 1% of the population that was doing something, we could change the world, But
but we need people to be active, actually move that ball forward every single day. And people think it somehow doesn't affect the big picture if they take the time to introduce this subject credibly to two people around them, or three or four on a given day. But again, we look at the mathematical equation about that. If one person introduces to two people credibly the first day of a 30-day month, those two to two more the second day. We've been through this equation a lot, but that's 5.5 million at the end of 30 days. People just need to move the ball forward every single day.
That's right, absolutely. I cannot back you up enough on this, and this is a moral issue. If we're going to call ourselves moral people, we need to not be apathetic about the destruction of the world and this kind of destruction of all life on this planet that is going on right now. Caller, with your number that ends in 6-3, let's try it again. Are you with us?
Hello. Can you hear me?
There you are. Yes. Yes. What's your name?
This is Gary.
Hi, Gary.
On
your mind?
Yeah, I host. I participate at the Global Skywatch website. I wanted to mention my idea that I've talked about it online, and it's do you remember the Wi-Fi idea that I spoke about, Russ?
If you can brief us again, somebody else has.
Oh, Gary, yes, I believe. Why don't you fill everybody in on what your idea was? Go ahead, Gary.
Oh, okay. I just I downloaded a program to expose GeoEngineering. I just type Google chemtrails or global or GeoEngineering watch .org. I just type in like messages. You can use any message there on in your Wi-Fi hotspot. I just use it like an anti-chemtrail billboard. That's what I'm doing right now.
So that's your way of starting spot fires and trying to wake people up, yes?
Yeah.
So
what I do. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, you first.
What I do is I go like to the library. There'll be this like one hotspot there, and I just turn my hotspot on, and I just I just use it for exposure, like to get the word out.
Well,
sometimes I feel.
Yeah. So Gary, when you turn your Wi-Fi on, just so people understand, there's some kind of a broadcast that takes place where people can see other people who are on the network. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's kind of like.
And so you have a name. What do? You name yourself like GeoEngineering Watch? Is that what you do, or so people can see that when they look at the people who are on the local network? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. I put a password because they won't allow, like it says, don't leave it blank. So I just put a password. No one connects to me. It's just like advertising. It's like I call it free advertising.
The more creative we are, the faster we'll get this issue to the light of day. And again, I would argue once we do that, once we reach critical mass, we'll be in for quite a ride. The power structure will be more dangerous than ever. Populations around the globe will unite against what's been done to all of them, because we've all been equally harmed by this issue. Well, some more than others if they've been hit with weather cataclysms that have been engineered. But there's nobody that hasn't been harmed, is the point. So they will fight this getting to the surface as tenaciously as they can. But if everybody uses the kind of creativity you have, we all move the ball forward every day, we'll get there faster. But thanks for sharing that with us, Gary. I hope others can mimic what you're doing to help us get the word out.
Yeah. One more thing.
Sure.
Oh, sometimes I feel like I'm the only one that's noticing this, guys. I mean, I drive around, I go everywhere. I can't see how people can't see. Look at the sky. I mean, it's so obvious every day. You can't drive down the road without seeing the lines in the sky. It gets frustrating sometimes. The other day I got upset and I just tooted the horn for GeoEngineering or anti-GeoEngineering. I did it for like 3 miles. So I just wanted to share that.
You know what? To relate to you, we all share that angst. The forest that I live in, and I live right in the middle of it. I mean, you can't see anything from where I live but forest. And It was thriving 10 years ago. It's completely silent and dying now. And every day this toxic canopy continues. And people around us are completely oblivious, going to, pick up a Big Mac and head to the movie. And it's shocking. Human behavior is shocking. But nevertheless, if we keep our focus and put that anger and angst, use it as fuel for the fire to move that ball forward. This issue is unlike any other. It can't be hidden much longer. It can't be. So unlike a lot of other important issues that eventually get swept under the rug, not going to happen with this issue. Not going to happen. It will be exposed. It's only a matter of time. So don't lose heart. No matter how much resistance we all get, we have to keep marching forward no matter what. And our efforts will yield fruit soon. Thank you very much for calling in, Gary.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah. Keep up. Thank you, Gary. Thank you for contacting me on that too. That's a good idea for getting some free exposure in hot spots. If you don't feel comfortable approaching people other ways, that's a good idea. That's a very interesting idea. So,
yes.
Yeah. So, caller, with your number that ends in 912, are you with us?
Yes. Hi.
Hi. Who are we speaking with?
Hi, this is Cynthia in Wisconsin, and I was wondering if anybody had reported to you darkouts. For instance, the other day, March 20th, it was the middle of the day and it was just blackout. And I've noticed that this has taken place even in the middle of the summer, where it's just absolutely dark in the middle of the day. Have you heard any reports of anyone else experiencing that? And I'm looking at the Earth data NASA satellite, and it doesn't look as if there's anything unusual. I'll post it right on the chat.
So you're speaking about just extraordinarily thick blanket of aerosol spray?
No, well, it's a cloud cover, and you can't see. You can't see at all. But the light just goes dim. It's dark in the middle of the day, almost like if they're flying, one of those sun shields, between us and the sun in Wisconsin. I mean, it's happened so many times. I was chatting with a friend the other day, when that happened, and she said that the lady in the health food store that was checking out was complaining also. Why is it so dark? And it's the middle of the day. And of course, I really don't have any way of gauging that or photographing it.
Now, one thing that can make these aerosol layers thicker and thicker is the more condensation nuclei you have. When you have very dark skies that you would normally anticipate some sort of precipitation falling from, if those guys are heavily aerosolized, there's too many condensation nuclei. So even though it looks like it should rain, it doesn't. It just stays dark, and that dark can be more of a featureless sky. We don't have the cloud definition that we would otherwise have because the aerosols tend to melt the clouds together, if you will, to try to use very basic terms. So we see a lot of phenomenon that we shouldn't normally see, wouldn't have seen if not for the climate engineering. So and the aerosol layers are getting thicker and thicker. This is, again, what I stated earlier in the show. This is the military-industrial complex mentality. If what you're doing is causing harm, they just do more to try to cover up the harm already caused by causing even more harm. It's a very vicious cycle. But again, we're seeing some of those darker skies here, but it's just simply the same manipulation on a bigger scale, and we're going to see more.
Okay, so have you had other reports from other parts of the country about dark in the middle of the day? I mean, it was almost the first day of spring.
Well, again, it just depends. Right now, there's all these programs, I would argue, in a state of flux. We may be headed for a blue ocean event by this summer. It's impossible to know at this point, but there's not much ice left. In fact, what they consider to be ice pack, and people should listen to this, any section of ocean that has 15% of ice or more, why would we consider that ice pack? That's still 85% ocean. So there's a lot of things being done to cover up the severity of what's unfolding, and the climate engineering programs are likely to go through a lot more flux because they really don't care what they do at this point. They're desperate. They're grabbing at straws. Project Lucy, Project Alamo. This is using the ionosphere heaters like HARP to microwave the atmosphere to try to degrade some of the methane that's spewing into the atmosphere. This is a go-for-broke race of insanity to the bottom. So we're liable to see a lot of phenomenon, but I'm sure if people see that, hopefully they can post and share what they experience. And if you get a picture of it, post it on our pages.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Cynthia. That certainly sounds really strange indeed to be darkened in the middle of the day, but that I've seen so much haze in the air. I don't know if she's, I don't know. But
well, I'm losing here. There's days, we had one a couple days ago. I'm losing 85% of my solar PV uptake from aerosol clouds, blocking 85 to even 90% of the incoming thermal energy that would be normally, or the solar PV uptake energy that it would for my panels, 85 to 90% from aerosol. That's huge. So
and Wisconsin is under constant cloud cover. There's hardly any days with any sun. It's just constant, and it's been that way since 2012.
Time to wake people up. We can't live under a toxic cloud for much longer. Again, it's all the cumulative effect is showing up everywhere. We have to make every day count.
Yeah, and it's shortening our lifespan. So thank you, Cynthia, for letting us know about that. And if I hear from other people, I will definitely broadcast it in our Facebook group and in other places as well, and let people corroborate that kind of information. But thank you for letting us know.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Cynthia. Caller with your number that ends in 612. Who are we speaking with? Caller with your number that ends in 12. Are you with us? Okay, caller that ends in 14. Are you with us? Caller with your phone number that ends in 14. Are you with us?
If everybody listening could be ready and to click off your mute button once you're called, we can roll through more calls that way.
Okay, well if I missed you, I'll come. Or if you got missed, I'll come back to you. Caller with your number that ends in 45. Who are we speaking with?
Hey guys, this is Abra, Texas Panhandle. How are y'all today?
Hi, I'm sorry. What was your name again?
Abra.
Abra. Glad to have you. What's going on down your way?
Oh, well, not much. Today's been kind of a hard day for me. I just learned that one of my close family members had a miscarriage, and she was pretty far along. She was probably 5 months into her pregnancy, so she has to, deliver. And I've experienced, miscarriages, and I know several other of my family members have. And we talk about, biological side effects of, constant aerosol spray, and this is one of them. I mean, we're so toxic, we can't even hold life within us. And that, to me, is, the straw, that breaks the camel's back. It's hitting home. It's our family, and so I've been hitting the pavement hard and keeping the ball rolling and sharing with my family. And, so I'm all on fire, and they see that, and they know that it has to come from a place within where it goes against my moral standards too. So I've been, communicating with my family, and my brother, bless his heart, he loves me, and he's been awake probably 15 years, and here I am, just into 3 years finding out, the real truth, the sad truth. And he says, you got to be careful how you come across, and you don't want to be, come across too strong and this and that. You're like a newborn Christian that's finally awake. And I said, well, something that I heard, Dane say, that I could be the last piece of sand that, tilts the scale. That's how I feel. And
for those around us, again, there's a way to come across with confidence and yet not be overpowering to them. And when the passing data on, that's why I encourage people to arm themselves with the flyers or data cards or a credible article, because you can confidently pass it on and confidently say, this is going on. It's affecting all of us equally. You should care. And then you don't have to sit and keep hammering them with particular points until their defenses go up, but you can very confidently pass on something that'll start a spot fire.
And I do, and I encourage people, and I found a quote that I'd like to share, if that's okay with you and with,
Sure.
all the listeners around that are, activists. I listen and I hear from people that are neighbors to me, like Eddie in New Mexico and you guys in California. And there's just a lot of people that just need to keep up the fight. And so I just want to share this encouraging quote. I want to get you on speaker real quick. Okay. All right, it's by Theodore Roosevelt, and it says, it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbled, or where the dearer deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasm, the great devotion, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumphs of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while doing greatly. so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat.
Excellent quote. Yeah.
It is, and it's something that I've, go ahead.
That's the bottom line. That is the bottom line. The only failure is in having not tried.
Exactly. And I won't give up, and they know, and they see that, and the fruit is showing. And so I'm really starting to gather ideas of how to reach people in the Panhandle. You know, we're in Texas. This is a Bible Belt, and so people are so black and white, but I do communicate. I get my point across. I pass along data, and, you know, I leave it for them to discover. But my mom's opening up her eyes, my dad. You know, remind them
it's their responsibility to be good stewards.
Yeah.
It's not an option. It's an obligation. So, you know, again, for people who want to decide that from a spiritual standpoint, this is all in bigger hands and they don't have to do anything, that is absolutely, with any of the great traditions, that is not an option. Absolutely not an option. Again, what's different about this issue than any other issue ever faced by the human race, this one is not going away. It's getting worse by the day. It can't be hidden much longer. So no matter what resistance we get, we should keep planting seeds, no matter what.
Yeah, we're going to, you know, continue with that, probably get a march together here in the Panhandle. I'm going to meet with some activists in Amarillo because I'm in Lubbock, and then we'll go from there. But we're not giving up the fight here, and I definitely am not. So,
we all march together. We all march together.
Yes,
thanks for that quote. That was very, very on target.
All right, thank you.
Abra, thank you so much for calling, Abra. And I would mention to some people in the Bible Belt that if they wonder about geoengineering, they might look at Revelation 18:23, which says the great merchants, the powerful merchants of the earth, deceived the people by their sorcery. And the word sorcery is the Greek word pharmakia, which actually means to drug or poison. So right here in Revelation, in 18:23, we have a quote talking about the dumbing down of the nations so that they can be deceived. And I think that includes apathy, you know, apathetic by drugging. That's interesting.
And all the major, again, all the great traditions, this is, people try to find some excuse to be apathetic, but again, it's not condoned or allowed with any of the great teachings. So it's, you know, something we all have to consider. And again, keep quoting that message in the phrase you read. I mean, that's the bottom line. Again, the only failure is in having not tried.
And stand in the arena. Yeah, it's by Theodore Roosevelt. It's a great quote.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Abram. Caller with your number that ends in 23. Who are we speaking with?
Hey, it's Helen. How are you all?
Good, Helen. How are you?
Oh, hanging in there. I just will make this quick. I heard on the news this morning that there was a sudden death for a brain aneurysm of one of the reporters and national reporters. Her name was something like Laura Cuccinelli, and she was only 49 and left a husband and 2 young children, they said. So, you know, immediately my radar went up and thought, you know, when are these people going to wake up if they knew this? We don't know what this was from, but it's, you know, again, so many people dying from, you know, heart attacks, aneurysms, things like this at a very young age. If these people knew that this was related to geoengineering, I wonder, you know, when they would start turning and, you know, instead of just preaching the lies, get out there and get on our team and start, you know, spreading the word of what is really happening. And the other thing, I woke a couple people up, or at least just passed information. I was on vacation last week in Florida and ran into a couple people. And even though I didn't have literature, I broached the subject about the weather and, you know, strange things. And, of course, one of them was actually from Maine, Russ, and was very interested. I told them that, you know, I had a colleague that was from up there and that I knew that Maine was getting really hammered with a lot of these plumes. And she said, yeah, you know, my husband, you know, has said something about that. So I gave them the websites and told them to do more research. So even on vacation, you know, I'm still at work. And I just wanted to ask Dane, if because of this methane release problem, and if the climate does rapidly warm, can you give us some sort of survival, you know, what kind of survival challenges are we going to be facing, and so something that we could arm ourselves with to help us prepare for what may take place?
First of all, it's not if the climate's warming. It's warming very, very rapidly, and those in the East Coast that have been really shielded from that because of these cool downs, I can only plead with them, don't believe me, don't believe anybody, please research at a wider level. The planet's an absolute meltdown. It's not about Al Gore. And the climate engineering has made this far worse, not better. That's why it's so incredibly not okay for people like Guy McPherson, who I, again, put a post up on this morning, and all the rest of the climate science community to blatantly, glaringly ignore climate engineering and then to convince themselves they're doing something for the common good. That's a lie. If the most destructive factor of all in the equation is being ignored, or not just ignored, but patently denied, and climate engineering has helped the methane to release, got some background noise coming from somebody's speaker, perhaps, but climate engineering has altered upper level wind currents, that's altered ocean currents. We have warm water now pumping right into the Arctic. It is releasing methane. In fact, the latest observations from the ground, Helen, they're seeing methane plumes, the last observations, 150 kilometers wide. It's happening now. Now, we don't know how much will release. Nobody knows. But it's safe to say at this point, after 65 years of climate engineering, it's making a bad situation exponentially worse. As far as what you can do, depending on where you're at, simply make sure you have full cupboards, a source of water, and be prepared for serious challenges. It's coming. We're going to face very serious challenges. Again, I don't claim to know exactly how the chips will fall. Nobody does. Anybody who says they do is simply making it up as they go. But if we have a car going 100 miles an hour, 10 feet from impact into a concrete wall, you can safely say it's going to hit and it's going to be ugly. And that's the scenario we face. So although nobody knows where all the pieces will fly, impact is coming. And not only is the human race not hitting the brake, they're hitting the accelerator, actually hitting the accelerator. And again, I think it might have been Mikhail Kaku, he's a physicist, who I think he said this, that it's like people have just crashed through the guardrail and are descending into the canyon, and they're arguing about what seat they get in the car. And that's sort of what the human race is doing right now. So the bottom line is we're close to serious challenges. The best thing we can do, the most positive, the most impactful thing we can do cumulatively right now is to focus on exposing and stopping climate engineering. And simply to expose it, I would argue, will make it inevitable that it will stop, along with the collapse of a lot of other things as people wake up. So we have to have a common goal, a focused goal. If we're going to put a hole in the armor, we have to have a focused spot where we're all concentrating, and this is the issue that matters most. So, Helen, again, that's a long answer, but prepare, have a source of water, and be prepared to hunker down wherever you are at some point. And that's the best advice I can give to people. I mean, there's a lot we can't know in this equation, but we can say safely that we're headed for a rough ride.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you, Helen.
Keep up the great work of keeping us informed. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Helen. It's great to hear your voice again. I know you're doing a lot down there in the South to raise attention about this, and I really appreciate the work that you do. Let's try this again with caller whose number ends in 12. Are you still with us? Caller, are you there?
Hello.
Hi there. Who are you speaking with?
Bill Manfredi in the Bay Area, San Francisco.
Hi, Bill.
I just wanted to thank you guys for your great work, and we are getting chemtrailed today like I haven't seen in a week. So I just thought I'd report in.
It's, there's anytime we see it on the radar coming in, and a lot of people, because it just floats in over the top of them, people who aren't really up to speed in this issue feel somehow it's some sort of natural phenomenon, and we're seeing at any given point in time 80-90% of the North American continent is covered with largely rainless, overcast aerosol canopy. So anyway, thanks for the update from your area, and yeah, we're seeing more and more of that likely to continue.
Bill, did you say in the San Francisco area, did you say?
Say again?
Yeah, East Bay, Berkeley.
Berkeley? Okay. Yeah, I get it.
I'm getting a little bit of a broken up transmission on this side, but yeah, we see it coming in on the radar. They work it off the coast, and if people want to see what they're doing off our coast and part of what's floating in over anybody on the West Coast, go to the satellite image link on the upper left of the GeoEngineering Watch homepage. You'll see a lot of links there that show clearly that they start this canopy going far off the coast, and they just keep working it as it goes inland.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also I tell people about chemtrailing, and they all think I'm crazy.
They won't for long. They won't for long. Again, don't let that deter you in any way, because they will not be able to maintain that denial for much longer. They won't. And for some people, the more the walls close in around them, the deeper their denial gets. And we're all going to face that. But don't let that shake your confidence at all.
Yeah.
This is as real as it
I
gets.
printed out 100 of your flyers and I hand them out.
If anybody who ever wants to get flyers at a really, really good price, you can go directly to Color FX. That's where I buy my flyers. And I don't know how they print them at the numbers they print them. I mean, it's a really that's the cheapest place to get them. Just Color FX. They're in Southern California, and you'd be surprised what kind of deals they can give depending on how much of those you get. And you can download them from our site for free. The only thing I care about is getting them out there. So that's a good place to get them. Color FX.
Okay, very good.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bill, so much for your call. Caller with your number that ends in 14. Who are we speaking with?
How you doing? I was looking at your guys' number, and the one I dialed, and I didn't realize mine ended in 14. Sorry about that.
No problem. Who do you have?
John.
Hi, John.
This is John.
Where are you calling from, John?
Kansas, but I grew up in San Diego. I lived there 30 years, so right when I left San Diego in 2008, I really started noticing it. But I actually have a diary from when I was in 9th grade, and they would ask. There was a little place you could check what the weather was like every day, and like 300 of the days I checked clear. And if there were all these chem clouds, I would have never checked clear. But what's interesting is if they're not geoengineering now, I'd hate to see what it looks like when they do geoengineer.
That's a very, very good question, John. In fact, that's one that came up with this roundtable discussion that I outlined some in the article I posted today with Guy McPherson. If this is not geoengineering, then what will we expect it to look like? If we have this much solar obscuration, a blocking of the sun, from what the climate science community is claiming to be quote condensation, which we know is an absolute lie. I mean, it's a profound question you ask, and again, they can't give an acceptable answer because they're, for various list of reasons, they're all in adamant denial. But this is what it's up to us to expose at this point. And again, if we keep trying, if we all keep effectively improving our methods of sharing the word, we are gaining ground very fast. I can say that.
What I do now is when I bring it up, I just bring it up as fact. It's like, my wife would be like, "Are we going to go out to the park?" I'm like, "Yeah, as long as they don't block out the sun too much today." So I just say things as fact now, like you're saying, approach it with confidence.
Yeah, exactly. It's not a debate or a question. It's a reality, and if you have that kind of confidence, people sense it. They sense it that you're not speculating or asking the question. You're simply making a statement of fact. Yeah.
And one more thing I wanted to say is, what's compelling to me is when I noticed there's 2 or 3 days with no spraying, and on YouTube, if I search videos by most recent uploads, so I get videos that are most of them from that day or that hour. And other people are also showing no spray days. So it's kind of weird how here in Kansas, I'll be like, "Wow, we haven't been sprayed in 3 days," and then I'll watch a video on YouTube of somebody in Phoenix saying the same thing. How can that be atmospheric conditions?
It can't. And keep sharing those. Share the data. I know we're just about out of time, but keep sharing your observations. Again, every single one of us can move the ball forward every day. Polish our methods, polish our manner of delivery, and let's keep moving that ball forward, because absolutely every day counts in this battle. The climate is unraveling very quickly, and I hope people keep taking in new data. This is very important to take your compass heading, again, to know what's unfolding, what the latest data is, how that fits into your conclusions. It's imperative to constantly, again, take in the latest and most relevant data. Russ?
Great. Yes, thank you.
I also have a projector for you if you want it.
Thank you, John.
Offer on Facebook.
Thank you, John, for the information. I'm sorry we're out of time. Sure. We have to go. This is the end of the show, but please join us next week. This is GeoEngineering Watch Radio. We're here every week, every Saturday at 12 noon Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, right here at ucy.tv. .org. and click resources at the top of the website to get flyers that you can download and print. Thank you for being with us this week. We'll see you next week.
The Anti-Media Radio, your host Nick Burnaby here on UCY.tv.